So here we go again. We're getting together each week. We talk about the shows that we're going to do on Right Angle. It's Bill Whittle and Stephen Green and Scott Ott in kind of a roundtable discussion about what we'd like to talk about this week. As usual, there's so much more in the news than we can possibly handle. So we've got to winnow that down to just the top 4 or 5 stories about COVID-19. I think... Can we agree? Can we agree that we're going to narrow it down to that?
COVID-19, it's infectious.
That's right. It's gone viral. So anyway, this week I happen to be hosting an additional episode, and so I get 2 cracks at the apple, 2 bites at the whip. I don't know what the word is at the term is for that. And I'd like to talk about first of all in the episode that we dubbed the Ott episode, I'd like to talk about some remarks that Alan Dershowitz made. Alan Dershowitz, he of Harvard University fame, an attorney who was on the team that defended President Trump in the impeachment trial, unusually since he's typically comes down on the Democratic or liberal side. But anyway, he's being interviewed on a show called Crowdsource the Truth, which is kind of a show like this. It looked like a internet video kind of thing with a host named Jason Goodman. And the topic of the forthcoming COVID-19 vaccine came up. And Dershowitz said that the state, meaning like the state you live in, not the United States of America or in general the government, but the state, under our constitutional form of government, has the right to compel you to be vaccinated. And in fact, he takes it even further, and this is the sort of money quote, and says, the state has power to literally take you to a doctor's office and plunge a needle into your arm. Those attorneys, they know how to use the technical terminology.
Well, okay, they stick the needle in your arm, but then they plunge the plunger.
Oh, yes. Stick and plunge.
Yeah, I think that's much more accurate and an important distinction.
But, it's funny because I thought, a lot of us have been hoping and praying that they would develop a vaccine. And I'm not sure everybody thought through the implications of that and say, well, if there is a vaccine, is it going to be entirely voluntary?
Where does Dershowitz cite the legal authority to do this reprehensible thing?
You're going to love this.
I am a big vaccine supporter, by the way. Vaccines has saved more lives than any combination of anything in the history of the world. But if he's actually saying that the state has the power to come into my house or take me away from my house and inject me with a hypodermic needle full of something that they assure me is a vaccine, then they got another thing coming.
The authority, by the way, as you asked that question, Bill, is under the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which reads as follows.
No, it's not.
You've got to love this.
No, it's not.
The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And he says that over the years, courts have upheld, and the Supreme Court has upheld, the idea that the public health responsibility is delegated to the states and that they can enforce for the common good measures to arrest contagious diseases.
Well, by that same argument, the state should have the power to silence for the common good dangerous ideas.
I'm not
Except
sure.
that one's in the Constitution.
Yes,
and also by that same definition, according to the 10th Amendment, the state should have the power to maybe exterminate potentially religious groups that they didn't particularly care for.
Again, the First Amendment, that one's in the Constitution. Now, I agree with you that the state shouldn't have this power, but you can't conflate these two issues when one is not mentioned in the Constitution, the other two you just mentioned are.
Right. So to say that the 10th Amendment of all things empowers the state to do anything it damn well wants to is a ridiculous argument and needs to be made by somebody with an advanced legal degree. You have to be that stupid to be able to misunderstand a sentence that clear.
I'm not sure he would say that the Constitution empowers the states to do anything they damn well want to, but he does specifically
that's the argument he's making.
No, the argument he's making specifically has to do with public health and the police power that is delegated to the states by the federal Constitution. We don't have a federal police force.
Well, then, why was the ability to intervene in public behavior not part of the Constitution? Why was it not one of the enumerated powers? Why was it not said the Congress shall have the authority or the authority to delegate to the states the ability to provide whatever medical procedures are deemed to be appropriate by the state at any given time upon the American population, whether they like it or not? Where is that enumerated power in the Constitution?
Well, they're not enumerating powers for the federal government. This is specifically something that the states, presumptively anyway, according to Dershowitz's argument, a power that they already held, and the federal government did not interfere with that power. The states.
Dershowitz's argument is that the 10th Amendment allows the states to do whatever they damn well want to in contradiction to the federal government.
You keep restating his argument in a different way than he said it.
How did he say it, Scott? What is his case?
He said basically, let me see if I can get some further in my notes here. He did say the state literally has the power to take you to a doctor's office and plunge a needle into your arm. He basically says that you, Bill Whittle, not specifically you, he didn't mention you by name, you have no right to refuse vaccination with regard to contagions. He didn't say you could, he said you could refuse a vaccination if it was something that, a condition that just you would get and that's not a threat to public health. He also, by the way, later on in the interview, and I watched the interview as well as read several accounts of it, he said that the state should offer people an alternative. For example, stay in your house. He also said, by the way, you don't have the right to avoid wearing masks if the state government has mandated that, and you don't have the right to open your business if the state government has said that you should not open your business because the state is delegated the responsibility in what he would call our democracy for defending the public health. And no, there was a great quote in here about individuals. The state has, and this is a quote too, states can take reasonable actions to prevent the spread of communicable diseases, and no individual, where is it here? Oh, here it is. If any individual is allowed to act without regard to the welfare or of others, true liberty does not exist. Now, that was not Dershowitz.
Argument.
That was from a 1905 Supreme Court ruling called Jacobson versus Massachusetts. But basically, if anybody can essentially exercise what I'm going to call individual nullification of laws, then true liberty doesn't exist because everybody's just making it up as we go along.
It's not individual nullification. The laws are null by definition. They're null according to the rights granted to me in the Constitution and in the First Amendment of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment does not give the states the power to do whatever the hell they want to because they've declared an emergency, and it just simply doesn't say that. And it's clear it doesn't say that. Can I pin you down
on a question, though? Because when we get into the episode, you keep saying whatever they want to. We're specifically talking about the area of public health. Are you asserting that states have no authority in the area of public health?
I'm saying what we have learned from this COVID-19 pandemic is that the state will use whatever definition it chooses in order to determine that the state of emergency continues, that there's no definition, no legal definition, no constitutional definition for what constitutes a state of emergency. There's no sunset provision on what constitutes a state of emergency. There's no provisions on what ends a state of emergency. And if you're saying that just the mere declaration of the state of emergency abrogates all of my personal individual freedoms and liberties, then all the state has to do is declare a state of emergency, which they don't have to justify, which they don't have to explain, which they don't have to limit, and which we don't ever have to get out of. It's entirely at the discretion of the politicians. It's tyranny, and it's clearly a violation of my constitutional rights. Clearly.
See, for those of you,
I have a constitutional right to freely assemble. That's literally there written in the First Amendment.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay, I'll have to look this up before we tape the segment, but it was either, I want to say it was in Washington State. The state of emergency is limited by law, state law, to 28 days. And rather than go to the state assembly to reauthorize for a further 28 days, the governor is suing.
Nice. Well, in Wisconsin, it was Wisconsin, I believe. No. Is it Wisconsin or Michigan?
It was
I can't
Wisconsin.
remember. Wisconsin?
It's Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, the GOP legislature sued the governor, Tony Evers, and basically said he doesn't have the authority to extend the state of emergency that he declared another month. And a court agreed with, the Wisconsin Supreme Court agreed with him by a 4-3 decision, which was, of course, tilted ideologically 4-3 along party lines, or at least party appointee lines. In any case,
it's the dumbest. It's a great topic. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And if you're new to Backstage, by the way, because you're a new member at BillWhittle.com, or just finally getting around to watching a Backstage episode, or maybe it's because we now, if you're logged in as a member, the Backstage episode stays up on the front page all week, so that members, once they're logged in, they can see that Backstage episode. Nobody else can see it. It's just you. The non-members are on the outside, kind of in a special colony that we have to keep them from infecting others. But anyway, the idea here, as you can see in this Backstage meeting, it's not that Dad is carving the turkey. Dad is sharpening the knife. And it takes a long time for Dad to sharpen the knife here in this Backstage episode. And then we'll record the actual episodes, which is Dad carving the turkey. So that's the concept.
Given the quality of the dads and the knives here, this is a long and exhaustive process.
We're sort of a collective dad. I'm not saying Bill is dad or Steve is dad, but we're just kind of, we're America's father.
Dad.
We're the triune dad. So that's one. That's my one episode. And then the other one, I'm advancing through I have this little note-taking device here, and I'm advancing through my notes. So the other one was interesting. This comes from a New York Times story, which of course means it must be so. That there's a group, a couple of guys actually, twin brothers who are immigrants to this country, Rafael and Omar Rivero, who run a little organization that they've been running for 8 years called Occupy Democrats. And you can go to OccupyDemocrats.com, but primarily they live on Facebook. They've got a Facebook page with some 9.9 million followers of their Facebook page.
Wow.
The website, you can see that the content stopped. They really stopped producing content on their website in March sometime, and you just link through to their Facebook page. But the point of the New York Times story was that this little Occupy Democrats group has something like half of the top viewed videos or the top interacted with videos on Facebook in the past month, and that they are more effective at getting messages out there than both former Vice President Biden, who's running for president, in case you haven't heard, as well as President Trump, and frankly, the parties themselves, that these two guys, with 5 people that they've hired in the interim, are cranking out content on Facebook, and some of it just really goes viral. And they basically, the Occupy Democrats got the idea from the Occupy Wall Street movement, where they said, look, this is interesting to hang out in, Zuccotti Park here, but we don't have any Occupy Wall Street congressmen. There's like nobody, there's no leadership in this thing. And so they are making an effort to provide leadership to get Democrats elected, including Joe Biden. And the New York Times seems wowed by the impact that they're having. And basically, I think Bill will love this. The whole point of the story is that Democrats for too long have been losing the social media battle and have not had the edge there, and that finally somebody has come forward to speak truth to regain the initiative so that the Republican dominance of the internet can be stanched.
Wow. It's always projection with these people every single time. That said, number one, never heard of these guys. Wish them the worst of luck, best of luck, whatever. I assume they're pushing. Yeah, you said they're pushing for Joe Biden and all that. I find it hard to remember a presidential nominee who doesn't remember himself all the time that he's running for president. So I think they've got that as a real obstacle in the way here. That said, what did Occupy Wall Street accomplish other than to pay a bunch of losers $15 an hour of Soros money to live in tents in cities?
Well, that's their complaint. The Rivero brothers have exactly your complaint. They're like, we're not accomplishing anything here.
So setting up a virtual squatter camp on Facebook, that's going to make the big difference.
Is there an opportunity to actually virtually defecate on a virtual police car? Can you do that?
If not, we need an Apollo scale program to develop these digital tools in the fastest possible time at the greatest possible expense.
They one of their missions is to prove that Joe Biden can go viral with something.
Yeah, okay.
And to overcome they said it seems like all the attention is around characters like Ben Shapiro, and they want to, kind of steal that initiative back, steal the flag, capture the flag. They created a Facebook page called Ridin' with Biden that is doing better than Biden's campaign Facebook page, sharing in many cases the same content that's on Biden's page, but people are going to see it at the Ridin' with Biden page that's run by OccupyDemocrats.com.
Well, that's a low bar,
I just went to their
though.
Facebook page. Here's their top post as we record this. Breaking.
Everything's
The
always
president's
breaking.
pathological hatred for his predecessor led to an unprecedented show of respect. Trump will not be unveiling Obama's presidential portrait at the White House, to which I replied, see, I thought that Obama's use of federal agencies to spy on and invent baseless collusion allegations against his successor would have been a prior unprecedented act of disrespect.
Did you just write that on their page?
I just did, yep.
Oh, nice.
He's trolling in the middle of Backstage.
Yes.
I'm not trolling, I'm responding.
Responding, that's right. It's a response. Isn't this the picture of President Biden? President Biden. Yikes. President Obama sitting on a chair kind of enveloped in a shrub? Is this that painting?
The 4-year-old painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought. I think it was something funny, too. Somebody else say words now.
Well, it's funny. Well, here's one of the quotes that we'll bring up in the episode. One of the big mistakes, they say, one of the big mistakes of 2016 was not immediately embracing Hillary Clinton as a change agent and as someone to get excited about. So
these are such empty words. You take the cool, hip, progressive phrases and you just stick these dumbass labels on whoever the new it girl or it boy is to get people excited about it, even though the phrases are meaningless and whatever little tiny shred of meaning they might have or people might imbue them with, kind of like Obama being a blank slate, doesn't fit. You cannot call Hillary Clinton a change agent and be a serious person or a serious person who is not comatose.
That's what I love about that quote. It's like, it's not that the problem wasn't that she wasn't actually a change agent and she isn't somebody you can get excited about. The problem is that we didn't embrace that idea. We should have just made it so by embracing it.
It's not an idea. It's a bald-faced, laughable lie.
And now they've got Biden that they're going to try to embrace that idea with. So anyway, those are my lovely topics this time around.
I remember what I was going to say.
Yes.
They are right about one thing when it comes to the liberty part of the internet and dominance. The left can't meme. They just
cannot.
The left cannot has meme.
They can't do it. They try. They fail. They're full of fail.
That's where our friends at the Patriot Post excel. So it's when you're competing against the Patriot Post.
Don't even.
But yeah, the challenge is you've got to be funny. You've got to have ideas. But, Stephen, what you said, I think, about projection, and if you can, remember to talk about that. But this idea of the left is losing its edge in social media. And so we fight back with truth. We punch them in the mouth with truth.
Is that what they say?
Yes. Yes. And it's
funny how violent these people tend to be, isn't it?
It's amazing how both sides of the most aggressive people on social media, both sides are essentially saying the same thing. The other side is more dominant than we are. We need to defeat them with truth.
Yeah, but we say defeat them with truth. We don't say punch them in the mouth with truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That did seem a little grisly. Anyway, so there it is.
Swine.
9.9 million followers on Facebook.
Yeah, I kicked him in the crotch with facts. By facts, of course, I mean my foot.
The great crotch kick of fact. So, Stephen Green, speaking of a kick in the crotch, Stephen Green, do you have a topic this week that you'd like to discuss on Right Angle?
Yeah, but I'm going to need your guys' help on a little direction here. I wrote a column yesterday that I wish I'd remembered to work in Irish democracy for this, because I think that's really what's going on in this country. Irish democracy, of course, is just ignoring the government because they're awful British overlords, and that's what the Irish did. And we're seeing it in this country as the lockdown starts to break down. But what I also wanted to focus on was something Hillary Clinton said, because, putting her screeching face on the thumbnail is always good for traffic, especially when she's calling her fellow Americans, when she's calling Americans
terrorists,
domestic terrorists. Yeah, did you see that?
What? I did.
Yeah. She calls the armed anti-coronavirus protesters in Michigan domestic terrorists. The guys who are peacefully protesting, but they're openly carrying rifles or pistols on their person, which is
so they're not
to do in Michigan.
Wielding or brandishing them or discharging their weapons?
No, they're showing up, at the State House.
Have they killed anybody?
With an AR slung over their shoulder.
Seems like a bit of a lowering of the terrorist bar.
Yeah. It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know how terrorists normally walk around with a semi-automatic rifle slung over their shoulder until they get to the place where they're going to commit their act of terror.
Or carrying Qurans, for example, that kind of terrorism. Having a Muslim walking down the street with the Quran, or maybe a group of Muslims gathering outside of a mosque, that kind of terrorism. That's what she's talking about.
Yeah, that kind of domestic terrorism. So, what do you think, guys? Should I lead with the Irish democracy angle? Because that's a big story. Or should I focus in on the Hillary Clinton thing and kind of maybe broaden it out from there?
What's new about the Irish democracy? I don't get the connection there.
It's the fact that the lockdowns are breaking down.
You could use that as a lead-in for the Hillary thing. I mean, they're related to the degree that the thing that Clinton was talking about is a response to that.
Yeah. Okay. Because protesters assembling when they're supposed to be staying in their homes clearly means the lockdown in Michigan is breaking down.
Yeah.
In New York over the weekend, New York City over the weekend, people are going to bars, hanging out on sidewalks with their cocktails and everything. California, it's the same story on the beaches there. California is slowly kind of stage opening beaches here and there, which I'm sure you could talk about this, Bill. But
yes,
by and large, people are doing what they want.
I love how they're domestic terrorists because they're exercising both their First and Second Amendment rights simultaneously.
Yeah.
My understanding is that they are not able to use their bikini bottoms as a mask because they're not large enough to cover their nose and mouth.
I actually have a video I can play for you. I don't
want to see what I just described.
No. We drove down Pacific Coast Highway last Sunday, Natasha and I.
Oh, nice.
And this is all you need to know about the state of California. Because of the enormous pressure, Gavin Newsom had declared that the beaches are open so long as you don't sit on, you can go to the beach as long as you don't go to the beach. You must be conducting activities like walking, swimming, or surfing. But even better than that, as you go down Pacific Coast Highway, you see all the beaches are open, but the parking lots are closed.
Yeah, and I remember when we were out there, how difficult it is just to get to a beach.
And that was with all the parking lots open.
Yeah.
Parking lots are closed. So there's a little FU from the state for those of you who have decided that, maybe Greta Thunberg may be wrong in her COVID-19 analysis.
By the way, we went the other day over the weekend, Stephanie and I, for the first time now since third week of March, we went to a restaurant. There's a little place called McAllister's Deli. I think it's a franchise. And they were open. You could sit down in the dining room. They had every other table set was marked with a sign that said, "Don't sit here," basically, because we're keeping social distancing. And people were coming and going, mostly picking up food. I think there was one other couple sitting in the restaurant, and then another family came in while we were there. But it's the first time that I've been in public without a mask in a restaurant eating food, and I was like, yes.
Nice.
It must be so nice to live in a free country. I'm going to try and get there. I may tunnel my way out, or maybe I'll take a raft or something. I'm going to find a way.
But anyway, it was
Hey.
awesome. And Bill, or Steve rather, one of our members, and I wish I could remember his name, but one of our members in the comments when we did that episode about people who are abandoning their U.S. citizenship, he was asking about. Bill has often said that there's an American dream, but most other countries there's not like a Greek dream, so to speak. And he basically was asking, what's the difference? I think he was from Ireland, and he was saying, what do you have that Ireland doesn't have when it comes to that idea of something that's distinctively, exceptionally American?
Oh, this is for me?
For anybody who wants to take it, but your mention of Ireland sparked that memory that somebody.
Okay.
First off, you can say whatever you want to and not go to jail. How about if we start with that one? Why don't we just start with that one?
Can you not do that in Ireland? I don't know anything about Ireland.
Of course, there's not a country in the EU that doesn't have hate speech laws of some kind or another where some unelected politician has determined what you can and cannot say. We'll just start there.
Good place to start.
And he was being he wasn't being,
No, I know he wasn't being a dick about it.
He was just like, he wants to know.
Yep. So number one, you can say whatever you want to. Number two, the reason you can say whatever you want to is because you can own a gun and people can't come and take you away for saying whatever you want to. That's basically it if you really want to know, honestly. You got 95% of it right there. That's pretty much it.
Fair enough. And also in other member news, by the way, this week at the store where I work, I had two encounters. One with a young man named Xavier, who's not yet a member, works at a local business here, and stopped by the store just because he loves BillWhittle.com and our shows. And 26-year-old who's headed for the Air Force. And he divined where I work by the little clues that we dropped along the way. And so
Smart boy.
So anyway, he came in to say hi and just express how much he loves it. And also a fella named Tony and his wife Diane, who came in, and they actually came in to shop for some furniture. And Tony is a long-term member, and I think has been watching us from way back. And he was very excited to meet somebody who knows Bill Whittle, and so. It was, and he wanted me to make.
I don't know anybody in that category.
That's right. He wanted me to make sure to share with you that he and his wife are praying for us, and really kind of heartfelt.
This is the text you sent us last night.
Yes.
That was so sweet.
It means the world to us. It means the world to us.
And it was funny because you get the sense that he's a little bit more enthused about the whole thing than his wife is. But while we were talking, of course, I've got this mask on and it's my wife's mask because her mask is actually a good mask, but it's got like all these really wild paisley print designs on it. So I'm wearing a mask and we're talking, and all of a sudden Diane says, "Oh, I know that voice." Tony's like, I'm always showing her the videos, and it's like, so anyway, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Xavier.
And thank you about all of you. I know you all think that we do this for the wealth and the money.
And sure, that's great, but
we do it for things like that.
It's interesting because Tony, very early in our conversation, he said it just occurs to me that you don't know me. He's like, I feel like I know you, but you don't know me. And
no, we do.
It's
and I kind of
lopsided, isn't it?
I kind of thought that you did. And I said, no.
We know him.
And that's what I think. I said, we've talked about this before. We kind of do feel like we know you.
Yeah.
So anyway, very cool times. Feel free to stop by and say hi, although keep the appropriate social distance of roughly 7 miles would be good for people to stop. So anyway, Stephen, you covered yours, right?
Yes.
And now Bill Whittle, it is down to you. How are you going to rescue this week's episodes, this failed effort this week?
Well, I watched noted philosopher and scientist Greta Thunberg on CNN answering difficult questions like, isn't it great that science is taking a forefront now in the pandemic? And I thought, well, They've been wrong about everything, but we shouldn't let that slow our respect for them down when the common people turn out to have been right about everything. But I decided no. The fact that they have those, that she's a reporter and that she's on CNN, and mostly that she's talking about science, convinced me that I should give up my conservative ways and become a person who lives only by what science has to show us.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
What was the occasion for this interview? Like, did they seek her out and say, noted science expert,
they brought her on the air.
We want to get a 16-year-old in here to talk because we need to ask about science?
Yeah,
yes,
it was a panel.
Rand Paul's not qualified. He's only a medical doctor. But Greta Thunberg is the voice of a generation. So they had her on to talk about how exciting it is that scientists are finally getting a voice in society during the COVID-19 outbreak.
Steve, you said it was what?
And scientists like I'm just going with this just as a warm up. Scientists like Niall Ferguson, who predicted 2 million American deaths, and who, as it turns out, when other epidemiologists took a look at his computer model, were able to say within 3 or 4 minutes, "This is garbage. This is garbage." Did nobody peer review this? No, apparently not. We shut down the whole world economy based on what this one guy decided might be interesting, and didn't even stand up to peer review among anybody before he published it and scared the living daylights out of the world. This is all set up for the point. I've decided to become a disciple of science and listen to what the science is saying. So as part of my new way of looking at life, I was pleased to discover an article here in the Business Insider that shows a scientific survey, a study even, so it's got to be true. It says that according to science, journalists drink too much, they're bad at managing emotions, and operate at a lower level than average, according to a new study. Now, what does a lower level than average mean? Well, according to the article, it means that they have a below average ability to regulate their emotions, suppress biases, solve complex problems, switch between tasks, and show creative and flexible thinking. Now, I'm not a professional scientist, but I do know a little bit about scientific terminology, having been around them for most of my adult life. And what they're basically saying, so you might want to write this down. The scientific term for journalists is that they're stupid.
Well, and not just stupid, but ill-behaved.
And they're drunks, and they're children. They're stupid, drunk children is basically what the scientific study says. And it goes on and on and on. But you'll be happy to know that it's not because they're stupid. Bolded here in the article written by a reporter, by the way, bolded. The results show that journalists' brains were operating at a lower level than the average population, particularly because of dehydration and the tendency of journalists to self-medicate with alcohol, caffeine, and high-sugar foods. In other words, they wouldn't be stupid if they drank more water. And you know what that tells me? That tells me that if you are able to perceive that the reason you're so stupid is because you don't drink enough water, and then you don't start drinking more water, it's an incurable condition, your stupidity. So it's got nothing to do with water.
Is the point of this show that we are going to make an effort to get the journalistic field properly hydrated?
No, our effort here is to show that we should listen to our progressive moral and intellectual masters and go with the science, because this science is pretty compelling. They drink a lot more. Now here's some interesting, not just to be fair now, here are some things that journalists scored pretty high on. They scored high on abstraction, which is the ability to deal with ideas rather than events. Now, that's the perfect quality you want to have in a journalist.
Wow. Or
is somebody
just the
who cannot
opposite.
somebody who cannot deal with events. They're not interested in the events. They're interested in the ideas behind the events. That's one quality that journalists have. In other words, it highlights the ability to think outside the box and make connections where others might not see them. In other words, why let the people who are reading what they're saying make the connections? Because they're not capable of describing the events. They'll make the connections for you, and they'll include that in the story. Here's another thing that journalists are better. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, the bummer about this is the mix of characteristics, because if they had the ability to make connections, to see abstractions and ideas behind events, they'd make excellent entrepreneurs if they weren't drinking so much.
Correct. or so stupid, or so childish.
Well, that too.
Here's another thing. Here's another thing that journalists are good at. Value tagging, which is the ability to assign values to different sensory cues, such as whether something is priority or has a meaning. Scoring highly in this area indicates a good ability to sift through information and pick out what's important. Again, not the job of the reader to sift through the information and pick out what's important. Don't worry. We will have an alcoholic idiot child take care of that aspect of the journalism procedure for you.
We're binge watching The West Wing after I read Aaron Sorkin's pilot for the show. I'd never seen any episodes of The West Wing while it was running. And so we've started watching it. And one of the frequent refrains, because CJ Craig is the press secretary and she's always dealing with the journalists, and you often hear people in the White House and in the press pool saying, it's not a story. That's not a story. That's a story. And what you're just describing there is the ability for people to recognize, yeah, I can sell that to my editor who will put it on the page one because he thinks that the people will want to see that story. It doesn't really matter the significance of it so much as it does the ability of it to be a story. It's kind of like in Moneyball where the scouts would look at a player and go, that guy's just not a ball player. He's not a ball player.
No, he's not. And speaking of baseball and the fact that journalists are what Donald Trump would call they're not long ball hitters. Here's what they don't score very well on: executive function. Now, executive function is essentially intelligence, but we're not going to just say that they score low on intelligence. We're going to say that they score low on executive function, and we'll say this too. Their low scores for executive function also suggest poor sleep, nutrition, exercise, and mindfulness. Yeah. Many participants reported that they had no time for breaks while working. So if you fail your law school exam or your IQ test or whatever, it's not because you're stupid. It's because you had poor sleep, poor nutrition, not enough exercise, and you weren't mindful enough. It got nothing to do with you being stupid. It's just you weren't getting enough sleep.
Well, that executive
for your entire life.
That executive characteristic, in my mind anyway, is the ability to make a decision and to live with the consequences. And it represents a level of maturity to be able to say yes or no, and then whichever way you decide to follow through on that and live with the consequences of your decision.
Well, imagine then my shock and surprise to hear that here's another thing that journalists scored lower on: silencing the mind, which is related to the ability to have thoughts without getting distracted by them, or a powerful ability to focus. They do not have a powerful ability to focus. Low scores indicate the opposite, suggesting journalists have a hard time preventing themselves from worrying about the future or regretting the past. Just the kind of people we need to be providing us with the kind of unbiased. Wow. Yes, wow. Yes, it is. It's science. So right here. Yeah. So it's got to be true.
Well, as soon as you said heavy drinking, you had immediate credibility with me because I worked at a newspaper.
Precisely correct.
And I had a lot of contact with journalists, and I was like, okay, yeah, well, that's fair.
Yeah, there you go.
let me just read you this last graph. I'll read this on the air too. This is at the end of the article of the study. The headline conclusion here. Here's the headline conclusion, the short form. The headline conclusion here is that journalists are undoubtedly subject to a range of pressures at work and home, but the meaning and purpose they attribute to their work contributes to helping them remain mentally resilient despite this. Nevertheless, there are areas for improvement, including drinking more water, reducing alcohol and caffeine consumption to increase executive functioning, and improve recovery after sleep. That's the headline conclusion. My headline conclusion is that reporters are stupid, childish, and drunks. But I can't put it quite so succinctly as the reporter who wrote this article did. Nevertheless,
of course, the question
I do feel
in all our viewers' minds is, what does Greta Thunberg think of this study?
Greta Thunberg. Is it Thunberg?
I don't know. How do you say it? It looks Thunberg. How do you say it, Steve?
Thunberg.
I say Thunberg.
Was it Thunberg?
But I don't know that to be true.
Okay, it sounds like it's Thunberg.
I looked it up back when she first became a very angry, tiny sensation.
All right, so she pronounces her name Thunberg?
Thunberg, yeah.
Anyway, Greta Thunberg says that she was on CNN as an expert on science. So
did she even make like a little paper mache volcano and win the science fair? Is there anything? Does she have any kind of credentials?
She's an expert in eating disorders and selective mutism, because these are things
She
that
made a little.
suffers
She made a little paper mache girl with a giant bullhorn screaming at a mountain. That's what her science fair project was.
But that has been peer reviewed and found to be substantial.
By Greta's peers, other teenage Swedish malcontent, undereducated communists agreed with her 100%.
Good to know.
Well, here we go, as the Joker said in the last Batman movie I saw.
I always think of the old guy who was actually apparently a British government official at one point, but from the Thomas Dolby video going, "Science!"
Science.
That's right. He didn't even know he was doing
Miss
something funny in
Yamamoto,
that.
you're beautiful.
Good heavens, Miss Yamamoto.
You're beautiful.
Okay.
Sakamoto, thank you.
So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. And we are going to change garments and get about recording this week's episodes of Right Angle, which you will enjoy on a daily basis. Thanks to
rend these garments.
Your very contributions here at this enterprise. The group of members is growing daily. And frankly, I've noticed increasing contributions and involvement in the member blog. Like more people are writing now. When we first started out, it was kind of a smaller handful of people that were recurrent writers. But now we're getting a lot broader group of people that are contributing to that. And we've also put that a prominent place now on the homepage. It's bigger, the blog and the member comments. If you log in as a member, you'll see that right up front. You'll notice, by the way, and I apologize because I'm the one who's causing all the heartache if you're having difficulty with the website, because we're changing some things. For example, right now, the tablet interface doesn't really work the way I'd like it to or the way you'd like it to, but we're going to make that better. We're going to create one that's even better than it was before. If you have ideas, there's a little bugs ideas link that you can send an email underneath the FAQ thing at the top of the page. We're always glad to help. And by the way, Bill, people have been asking me when we're going to do the next Zoom phone call. And frankly, folks, my schedule right now does not allow me to do that. Although, actually, it occurred to me, Bill, are you up for maybe Thursday or Friday?
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
Okay.
Say the word.
Because they just switched our schedule this week to do like 4 days on, 3 days off. And so I'm getting an unusual day off in this system. So we'll talk about that. We'll see if we can schedule
I'll be there.
that.
Just say it. Say the
day
word.
before. Okay. And anyway, so that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful for your contributions to this enterprise and for the way that you share this with all your friends and loved ones and have induced others to become members and have engaged in the blog and in the comments and in the private, the directory that you can search and send private messages. Thank you for all of that. For Stephen Green and Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. We'll see you this week on Right Angle.